The following was recorded on Friday 24th of November 2023 during Black Friday in Manchester city centre. I have noticed that regularly police have been detaining or arresting more and more homeless or vulnerable people on the streets of Manchester city centre. Perhaps you have noticed the same behaviour in your own local town centre. Sometimes the subject in question isn't homeless, but rather just someone having a hard time of late, such as this gentleman here, who I witnessed get handcuffed and shoved into the back of a police van for what the detaining officer claimed was because "you were being a bit aggressive at the beginning." He was then let go because word from some officer somewhere else who wasn't at the scene gave them the okay to let him go, or rather a member of the public, myself, showed up, saw a human rights violation taking place, and the police no longer could get away with picking on an easy target in broad daylight. So the moment a camera phone was pointed at them, they ran like rats from a sinking ship. Firstly, for police using the "you were being a bit aggressive, so we're putting you in handcuffs," that is not justification enough to put anybody in handcuffs. In fact, according to Greater Manchester Police's own website, all references linked below, apart from the inconvenience, people may feel irritated that they've been stopped when they haven't done anything wrong. That's completely understandable. So, aggression, in their own words, isn't justifiable to use handcuffs. Secondly, this chap was handcuffed on Oldham Street, which was very busy at the time, it being a late morning on Black Friday. Roughly 20 or so people were stood opposite us at the bus stop, waiting calmly and patiently for a bus. According to gmp.police.uk, the search must take place near where you are stopped, except in instances where moving you would protect your privacy. The squad car, which the two arresting officers that arrived first, had been very thoughtfully parked on the corner of an empty alleyway and Oldham Street. Of the two options, they very unwisely chose to pick the more public of the two options, directly within the view of the public. Why this is important is because the arresting officers not only breached this person's right to privacy, but they took their belongings during the stop and search and placed them on top of their squad car in full view of the public. Tisk, tisk, tisk. What was in this person's pockets, you ask? Was it illegal drugs, weapons, stolen goods, or the other things you're actually supposed to stop people for? They found a small bottle of CBD oil, pocket tissues, and a smartphone. So, unless the CBD oil was lifted from a Holland and Barrett, or the tissues pickpocketed, I doubt that was a proper use of the public's money, officers. If a single look from a policewoman's eyes could tell a story, what would that story be? Perhaps one of guilt, shame, feelings of getting caught doing something stupid that you shouldn't have done. Imagine if there had been some form of contraband that the arresting officers actually found. Would the top of your police car have been a great place to display terrorist-grade weaponry or Class A drugs? In order for police to use stop and search on unsuspecting civilians, they must have what is called reasonable grounds. Reasonable grounds is what the police want you to think is whatever their elite, sophisticated mindset has been trained to detect. It is not. What reasonable grounds actually is alarmingly, reasonable. It is the notion that if police were to describe their rationale for arrest or detainment to an objective bystander or third party, that person would agree without prejudice that that was the reasonable use of conduct for the officer to use. We, the public, are their reasonable ground. Now, suffice it for me to say, but being a bit aggressive and looking a bit like a guy we might need to arrest isn't reasonable grounds. This chap was calm, didn't pose any sort of danger from what I saw, wasn't resisting, and hadn't shown any sign that he was a threat whatsoever. So, As an objective bystander, I saw this individual in handcuffs and was already suspicious of this massively overblown use of force on display. He couldn't have caused a threat to others. Do you know how I know that? Because there were about 20 people waiting for a bus across the road from me. If there was a reason for concern for the public's safety, would these people look as neutral and calm as this? Let's say this person looked like someone the police suspected. Even then, a reason for stop and search is not appropriate. This from libertyhumanrights.org.uk. Unless the police have information which provides a description of someone carrying an illegal item, the reasonable grounds cannot be based on your physical appearance, and the officer must genuinely suspect that they will find the item they're searching for. This suspicion should be about how likely it is that you have the item. It shouldn't be based on how likely they think it is that you're breaking the law. So with the notion that we got some intel, you look like a guy we're looking for, we believe you're breaking this law, so shut up now while we feel you up in front of this bus stop full of people, is wrong. The objective must be crystal clear above what even law being broken is. So, for example, something reasonable would have been, we have intel that a person matching your description is carrying a firearm. That would be reasonable. Notice the high level of specificity with regards to the objective. Unless you were looking for CBD oil, I doubt that you were being specific, officers, but were rather looking for an easy target to exploit. For what reason, we the public can only guess. Perhaps it was because you had a rough upbringing and are using the police badge to compensate for the bullying you endured as children. Or perhaps you are sociopaths and have always been so you use the police badge to legitimize your own deceptive behavior. Or you're violating the human rights of our most vulnerable to inflate superficial arrest numbers, to appease your bosses, and to give the public a false sense of security that crime is actually being dealt with, when in actual fact it isn't, and it's getting far, far worse. Or all of the above. In all seriousness, if you see a vulnerable or homeless person being preyed upon by these parasites in uniform, don't just assume. Stick around. Make sure that these people, our most vulnerable and at risk, don't get fed on by this evil machine to validate its own misuse and brainwash us into thinking that we're safe. We're all that we have at the end of the day. The person on the streets could be me or you soon. How would you feel like being treated like this?